Well, it's interesting too about some of these locations that may not have been that prominent 5 or 10 years ago is there's a couple things that they bring. When they, because of location, they're able to solve latency challenges, and in some cases too, they're bringing massive amounts of untapped grid capacity that just don't exist in bigger metropolitan areas.
Absolutely, I think that's something that we spoke about it previously, and your great segue to this, Joshua, is the demand. We know that DCs have been a focus in a metro. We'll call it a greater metro, things like that over the last couple of years due to latent sensitive infrastructure or particular providers going, I need to be within X amount of milliseconds to and from these locations. That's been fantastic. It's been successful. However, you just can't buy a building with 100 megawatts in downtown somewhere anymore. It doesn't exist. So they have to go further afield. So the latency conversation is becoming more and more of it'd be great that you're under a percentage higher, or it's not even broached upon, full well knowing that when they build a site that's much bigger, a few miles or a few kilometers down the road, they will shift the less sensitive information to that, and that sensitive information stays within that sort of perimeter. But along with the presence of moving that infrastructure to a different region comes taxation benefits, which we've seen that supports, that development of construction. It promotes the ability for staff to move into that sector. We've spoken about that a lot in this podcast. But then also you have the idea of other technology sectors. If a cloud provider was to deploy 5, 10, 15 megawatts as a test case into that region, it then gets excitement that other cloud providers might do the same. Not all cloud providers have the same infrastructure. A Microsoft and a Google and Amazon, whilst they still provide we'll call it a cloud-based service, some sort of virtualization. Some have a specialty relationship with a backup service or a storage service. Some particular partners are exclusive with them. Others like to do multi. So when you normally have one cloud provider, be rest assured there'll probably be a second and probably a third, maybe even a fourth now coming through sooner rather than later, which means that the industries that are supportive of it, the IT sectors, the legal sectors, the accounting sectors, as I mentioned before, rely upon those cloud services, the web-based applications to access them. So if you're now going down a path, and I mentioned sovereignty early on, which is a key area of why the expansion is so heavily adopted, they want to keep all their data inside, their own boundaries, their own perimeters, their own country codes. So by having the cloud providers moving into that region itself, the data is being moved around. And you look at Poland as an example. Poland's just had a cloud adoption from Microsoft and others growing in there. That's public knowledge. They have seen that people from Amsterdam and from Germany who have who are Poland or Polish residents, that Polish data and that Poland information is being shifted back into the region because it now has an availability zone, is what they call it, moving it from a Dutch availability zone or a German availability zone into Poland itself. So we're seeing that shift, which means that it keeps the local economies going because they're supporting that region, helps with taxation, helps with the whole premise of why DCs are important. They're not a massive staff count as much as we're growing it out and the staff count's increasing. A DC doesn't necessarily hold hundreds of staff like others do. A cloud company will, and then the supporting businesses around it also do that. DCs are an enabler. That's what helps the businesses, get sticky to those regions. Companies like Megaport and the other network and service providers do the exact same thing. Cloud on-ramps and other processes bring attention to that region. I mentioned Estonia before. They're working through ways to get cloud adoption. First and foremost, they'd love to get a very large cloud provider to go in there. First, and how do you do that? You bring a cloud on-ramp to that to bring them in, draw the attention so that you can get accessibility there, which means that the staff who are owning IT companies, don't move away. They stay in their own region. They stay with their families. They kept the whole economics around, the circle of life, so to speak, keep that moving. So capacity is key around that. We're seeing things like nuclear. Renewables have been around for a long time, but hydrogen also is something that's come through over the last couple of months. I've done a tour of a hydrogen site, or powered hydrogen site, that is, to support some infrastructure. Those two areas which I support being, how do we get megawatts without, burning a lot of fossil fuels to create that is a problem, and that comes for a very long and downward spiral conversation that can be done for hours. But essentially, people want to build hundreds of megawatts. There's a powerhouse data center in the US. It's building an 800 megawatt site. That is not a small feat. That's a significant amount of skills to do that in construction and engineering, not to mention the vendors. They're rubbing their hands going, we've got a big site to support here with the generators and the cabling, not to mention the square feet in Imperial world, or square meters in the metric world of actual white space to put these racks in. How do we do that? How does it work? Many conversations around it, but essentially capacity is key. People want large amounts of demand because the AI is pushing that. People want to create some of their workloads and get some different results. There's ways in which that, draftsmen and others, scientific researchers and things like that go, this used to take 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, or even just simply, a processing model might take 4 or 5 days or a week to render a building. It can be done in multiple hours if we put it into some sort of large, GPU, that's a word that people use, the graphic processing unit. From the AI perspective, put that into that particular device or cluster or pod or whatever word you want to use. Essentially, you're putting it into an AI stack. So having an AI stack locally accessible to you, is helping the company grow and get more efficient. But that equals megawatts, which means where do you find those megawatts, which then equals where's the building going to be at? Do they have enough space? Singapore is, we'll call it stuck. They were having issues getting more power in. They've now relaxed some of it, but people are still hesitant because it's not enough. So they're going to other places. So we're seeing that regions now go, hey, we've got an abundance of power. We're having to support. Even certain states are willing doing taxation relaxations because they're going, we can, do an offset to grow in that area. There's many different ways that, these regions are growing to support the industry. It's just it's a weird world that we're in. Now, who would have thought that, data centers are sexy? Personally, I do. I got a hashtag for it, but not everyone does. And I think that's something that, they're a buzzword, and they will be a buzzword for a little bit longer because they're an enabler. They're a founding digital infrastructure partner in the world that we have, which is AI, cloud, emailing, all the simple things for your TikToks and your Snapchats and all the things that kids are playing and using and leveraging. Children have iPads. I didn't think as a student, 20 odd years ago, that I'd be having an iPad as a part of my day to day. We had a computer. That was all well and good, but having a portable device in your backpack to do certain things, all that information has to be stored for a period of time. So just growing, it has to be stored somewhere. I think that's sort of what we're seeing, Joshua, is the whole transformation of increased demand and therefore finding new blocks of land.